Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Now, many of y'all have been contacting me about whether this is a good time to come as a healthcare professional in the UK and what are your concerns, and if I personally feel that coming to the UK right now is a good decision. Now, I'm not an immigration advisor and I am definitely not somebody who's trying to promote coming into the UK as a reasonable resource for all of y'all. So, that being said, do take whatever I say with a pinch of salt. Go ahead, do your own research, see if whatever I'm saying resonates with you and makes you feel like you can connect with me or you can understand whatever I'm going through. Because all of the things that are described on my channel, whether it is this playlist talking about HCPC registration, whether it's this playlist talking about jobs in the UK, whether it's this playlist about visas, all of that has been my personal experience, and it's just the means of me sharing all of this information with you guys. So yes, if you are interested in knowing why I think right now is a good time for you to come into the UK as a healthcare professional, do not forget to stick to this video all the way to the end. But before we even move ahead, I just want to say that obviously a lot of y'all have expressed serious concerns about UK, including the high recession rates, the closing of possibly student visa and dependent visas in the future, maybe possible changes in PSW, like I've explained in my previous video. And I just want to say that these are sort of changes that are happening on a global or a sort of uh, nationwide level. Even changes related to some people saying, oh, nurses are going on strike in the UK because of the pay rise, physios are going to go on strike in the UK. Generally the recession is looking quite big, and are we going to be making enough money? And I just want to say that all of these are sort of changes, or all of these are sort of the external factors, and I am not considering those at this stage, because honestly, working in the NHS or working in the UK has brought me some peace of mind. I have worked back in India for about 2.5 years before moving into the UK. So I practically know what it was like to work in India versus working in the UK. And honestly, moving to the UK has been a good decision for me. But I don't expect it to be a wonderful decision for all of you guys out there. So these are the 6 reasons why I think it was really helpful for me to start working in the NHS. And if you want to know it, don't forget to watch this video all the way to the end. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the removal of the resident labor market test. Now, what essentially is a resident labor market test? So the resident labor market test was basically when any employer within the NHS had to recruit somebody. So they would advertise the role, and if they found someone from UK or if they found someone from the EU countries, they would be compelled by law to employ these people over the general population of immigrants. For example, the Asians or the Africans, or people from other continents. And so that means that anybody except people from EU were at a significant disadvantage, because obviously in an NHS interview, even if they found someone who maybe say from India was as good as somebody from any other EU country, maybe say Germany or Austria, they would prefer this candidate versus the Indian candidate. And that was like a major disadvantage why many of us were not really getting jobs in that early stage. But obviously, as Brexit set in, this sort of resident labor market test was washed away. And so now all of us are at a level playing field. And so if an NHS employer feels that we are at a much better level with, maybe say they find themselves comfortable with an Asian candidate or an African candidate, they will try and hire that person irrespective of whether that person is from the EU or not. It considered that all nationalities are at a level playing field. So that's one of the good reasons why I think right now the UK is a really good time for you to migrate into. Now, the second reason that I want to talk about is something that I've spoken many times on my channel, is the health and care worker visa. So the health and care worker visa was issued somewhere last year, that is in Feb 2022, with the views of drawing immigrants into the UK who are specialized in healthcare streams. Now, obviously in April 2022, they decided that many occupations fell on the shortage occupation list, especially across different medical streams, including medical practitioners, speech and language therapists, OTs, physios, paramedics, and many other such people. And if you want to know more about it, do not forget to check this reel where I've listed down some of the sort of key healthcare professionals which are on the shortage occupation list. But that being said, the second sort of biggest update was obviously in Feb, they released the health and care worker visa. Now, essentially, what used to happen for across UK Tier 2 visas were, if you were offered a job and you were offered a sponsorship, you would have to apply for the Tier 2 or the skilled worker visa. But as soon as they introduced the health and care worker visa, it created two major advantages for all of us medical professionals who would come under it. The first major advantage was that it's way cheaper. So when I say way cheaper, I literally spent about 230 or 240 pounds for my 3 years work visa, which was fab. Whereas I know a regular person who is just sponsored on a Tier 2 visa would be spending anywhere between 1,000 to 1,500 pounds for themselves. So that being said, it's really cheap to come on the health and care worker visa for a 3 year period, especially if that's just about 240 or 250 pounds even. The second reason that I absolutely love the health and care worker visa is that you do not need to pay the IHS. Now, for those of you who are new on my channel, watching this video for the first time, don't know anything about the UK, let's break this down. So the UK essentially has a system known as the NHS, the National Health Service. Now, the National Health Service is responsible for looking after all of your basic health needs. So that means if you are on the road, you have an accident, you can call an ambulance and they wouldn't charge you extra. Or, say you need to be vaccinated or your baby needs to be vaccinated. If you are covered under the NHS, you do not need to pay for it extra. And that is usually typically offered to all students, all people on work visa, because you pay something known as the IHS. So the IHS allows you to be under the NHS for as long as you are in the UK legally on a valid visa. Now, as a healthcare professional who's on the health and care worker visa, you do not need to pay this IHS. And this IHS is a massive amount of money. And I kid you not, it's really huge. It's about £2,000 for 3 years. So that entire sort of money is something you don't have to part ways with. So you save on approximately 2,000 years, or sorry. So you save nearly £2,000 on your 3 years of visa, which is another sort of reason why the health and care worker visa is so amazing. Now, just while we're on the topic of health and care worker visa, this brings me to point number 3, which is your dependents are allowed to be in the UK and work legally with you. Now, who comes under the dependents? Let's cover that first. So the dependents include anybody who is your spouse, so your legal spouse or your civil partner, and your children. Unfortunately, parents are not covered under this, so parents cannot come into the UK as your dependents. So now, if your spouse comes into the UK, they are allowed to work for 40 hours and they do not need to be sponsored. So that means that you would have a working income of nearly 2 professional people in the house running your household, which is a big plus point for me, because a lot of countries may not allow the dependents to work at an equal level as the sort of principal applicant or the person who's being issued the visa. So the dependents may not be allowed to work or contribute to the household bills. But obviously in the UK, this is different, and this is something which I think is a definite plus point for me. Now, somebody on my Instagram channel recently asked me a very interesting question, which I am going to answer right now over here, because that is my point number 4, is all of your non-UK experience is also counted towards jobs. So you would say, oh, Nikita, what does that mean? If I have 14 years of experience, can I start working as a band-aid? And I would say, that's going a little bit too far, but let's just break this down. If you have all of the essential requirements to practice, say for example, you have your HCPC registration, you have good set of clinical background and skills that you've learned over a period of time, then all of that sort of experience is transferable into the UK. Now, I'm going to explain this a little bit further, because I know many of y'all are going to be asking me these questions in the comments below. So for someone who is at a band 5 level, they are just sort of entry level jobs within the NHS. At a band 6 level, it's somebody who spent like 2 years or more, who has been practicing, comes in as a band 6. Somebody at a band 7 is possibly 5 years or even 6 years or more since they started practicing, and so on and so forth. Now, what is amazing in the UK is that they will consider your experience that is relevant from countries that are not the UK specifically. So say, for example, I was working for nearly 2.5 years, slightly lesser than that, but for the sake of argument, I was working for 2.5 years in India. And when I started working in the UK, I did not work as a band 5. So I essentially started off at a band 6 level. Now you would say, oh, Nikita, is that even possible? And yes, I am the living example that it is absolutely possible. And there are hundreds like me who do this. So if you've had any experience in any other country outside the UK, it should be counted, it should be valid. Do not listen to false rumors that say no, none of that experience counts, and you still need to start at a basic sort of band 5 level, because it may not be the case. It depends on the clinical experience that you have. It absolutely doesn't depend on the number of years. Obviously, the number of years do matter, but it's also the sort of clinical experience that you have that holds value in the UK. And talking about experience brings me to point number 5, which is the UK is filled with different specialities. Now, if you do not trust me, let me explain this further. As a physiotherapist, in India, a lot of people who are generally MSK therapists or neurotherapists. There were very few of us who are pediatric therapists. Now, that being said, there were even fewer of us who are women's health or, such physios. Now, in the UK, there are specialized services for all of these specialities. So you can choose whether you would want to be a MSK physio, whether you want to be a neuro physio, whether you want to be a pediatric physio, or you want to be a women's health physio, or you want to be a geriatric physio, or more of a sort of community physio. And this is one of the best things that I feel the UK has to offer in terms of, obviously, as compared to India, because the support networks are very, very strong. So, for example, even the pediatric physiotherapists in the UK have something known as the APCP, which is nearly as big as the sort of what support system the MSK physios have in the UK, because it's like a sort of body that gives out courses, webinars, that talks more about the research that's happening, that puts out vacancies that are live across the NHS or the Tracks Jobs website. And I feel that the support system has been absolutely great. So that is one of the reasons why I feel working in the UK has sort of broadened my scope, or broadened my horizon in terms of the different specialities out there. And if you are somebody who is young, who's just graduated, are unsure about what are the specialities out there, what should you be working for, I would highly recommend that you join as a band 5 level, so that you are just at a more rotational role and you get exposure to all of the different specialities the UK has to offer in terms of growth for yourself. And finally, that gets me to point number 6, which is the ILR or the PR for UK. Now, many people in the UK are under the assumption that there is nothing known as a PR, because obviously a lot of people generally are running towards the Canadian PR, the Australian PR, which is fab and it looks brilliant on paper. But let me just explain this to you, that essentially when you are on a work visa, you are on a quicker route, that is within 5 years you are eligible for something known as the ILR, which is the indefinite leave to remain, or the PR for UK. And if you are confused about it, do not forget to check out this video where I have explained all of that in very clear detail. But obviously once you've completed those 5 years, you are now going to be eligible for applying for the ILR or the PR, and within 1 year of that you can apply for British citizenship, which is a fabulous plus point, especially if you are someone who's looking to settle within the UK with your family along with you. Just in terms of wrapping up this video, many of y'all are going to be asking me this, saying, Nikita, many of these sort of rules were there in the past, so why is this a good time for me versus any of those previous times? And I just want to say that in the recent times, that's in the last year alone, there have been massive changes, including the removal of the resident labor market test, the introduction of the health and care worker visa, and there have been sort of many other changes across the NHS to sort of help us as people from non-EU backgrounds to gain some valuable entry and possibly get the potential PR or the British citizenship, which is what we wanted. And that being said, it was really hard for people who've come in the past. And when I say past, literally people who are my senior, who've come into the UK maybe 5 years earlier, 6 years earlier, found it really hard to find jobs in the UK because they did not have the PSW, found it really hard to find a sponsored visa because they were compared against EU candidates. And all of this overall led to lower jobs, especially available for people like us from Asian or African backgrounds. So this is why I think right now is a really good time for people to apply from across the globe and come into the UK if that's what you want. That being said, there are a lot of people who are spreading false rumors, who are not really sure about what's happening and just want to give information out of what they think happens. Now, obviously, all of the resources on my channel are based on my experience alone, but I would highly recommend that you find actual facts, check actual resources, whether it's the HCPC website, whether it's the NHS jobs, whether it's the government of UK website, so that you are clear about what you want and is UK going to be able to fulfill those sort of dreams and ambitions for yourself. And I hope that you found this video helpful. And if you did, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Take care.